You join us today with what I'm sure is going to be one of the most fun to ride bikes of 2025. This is the new KTM 390 Enduro, and I think a good place to start is to discuss the name. Now, KTM calls this an enduro bike, and if you look at the online comments, people have taken some offense to that, and in a way, rightly so, because this is not a true enduro motorcycle. It is based on a street bike. It has a street bike chassis which was originated with the 390 Duke and adapted for the 390 Adventure. And this uses the 390 Adventure chassis. The same story goes for the engine. This is a road bike engine. Began life in the Duke, also in the 390 Adventure, and now it's here. KTM themselves also know this, which is why this bike, even though it's called an Enduro, does not actually list under the Enduro section in KTM's website. This comes under the Dual Sports section. Now, while the engine tune is pretty much the same as the 390 Adventure, one change is that the Enduro R has a bigger sprocket at the rear by about 2 teeth. KTM says the overall gearing is more or less the same, and they've done that change to account for the larger diameter of the bigger wheel and that fat tire on it as well. Now, there are definite downsides to the fact that this is not a true enduro motorcycle. For one, it's 177 kilos fully fueled. When you look at a real 350cc, 450cc enduro, those bikes are about 110 kgs. So there's definitely big differences like that. But if you want a true enduro bike in India, KTM will sell you the 350 EXC 6 days. It'll only cost you around 13 lakh rupees and you can't register it for road use. This, on the other hand, will be about a quarter of the price. So now you see the reasoning behind this bike. KTM themselves say that this is not a serious machine for off-road competition riding. But this is something that's meant to be friendly for people coming into off-road riding and also something that they can use on the road. So that is the reasoning behind the 390 Enduro R, and I think once you understand why this bike exists, you'll be happy that it does. So that's the philosophy of the 390 Enduro R. Now let's talk about what it actually is. This bike is really closely based on the 390 Adventure, and that means that you have the same chassis, the same engine. The big difference is that it's moved to an 18-inch rear wheel, whereas the Adventure is a 17-inch. And this bike has Mitas EO7 off-road tires, 50/50 tires. They're chunky, they're really good tires, and they really add to the capability of this motorcycle. The front tire is more or less the same. Another hardware difference is that it's moved to a smaller 280mm front disc, whereas the Adventure is on a 320. This is something you see on dirt bikes, smaller disc. It just gives you better feel and modularity off-road. And we've only ridden this bike off-road and it really worked quite nicely. Another difference is that you have a dedicated button to turn off the front ABS, which the Adventure doesn't give you. Beyond that, the differences are mostly visual. Slimmer bodywork. The whole bike feels slimmer, not only at the front but also at the rear, and the interface for the rider to hold onto the motorcycle is nicer because of that. It's also got a smaller fuel tank, which is 9 liters versus 14.5 liters. Now, if you look at the spec sheet, it's only 5 kgs lighter and it's got 4.5 liters less fuel. So where does that extra weight come from? Well, some of it is down to the rims and the tires. These are not tubeless tires, they've got tubes in them, and for an enduro bike, that is okay because these bikes are meant to be ridden off-road and serious off-road riders prefer having tubes. So you bend the rims on a rock, but the tube still holds there and you can get back home, and that's why the off-road guys like having tubes. There is one other similarity to the 390 Adventure that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's a bit of a disappointment. It's the fact that this motorcycle comes with the same 200mm of suspension travel as the India spec 390, and it does not get the 230mm that you get on the international spec bike. Now, when we heard that at the presentation, I was really quite disappointed because for me, one of the drawbacks of the 390 Adventure is that its suspension feels too soft and it bottoms out easily when you start riding it aggressively off-road. And for that on an Enduro R, that just was disappointing. But here's the nice thing about motorcycles. It depends on how they ride and not what the spec sheet is. And the moment we went out on the trails, this bike instantly felt better. Small jumps, bigger jumps, it just soaked it all in. And coming back in, meeting the technical guys, we found out that they have reworked the internal suspension. So the springs are the same, but the damping is different and there's a higher level of preload set on the suspension. Now remember, KTM gives you adjustable damping at the front, but there's no adjustable preload. So you go with what you get from the factory. The other interesting thing is that it should be possible to swap the internal components of this fork and the monoshock. You'll have to change the whole monoshock and put that on the 390 Adventure if you want more support off-road. So that's something I found quite interesting. But let's get back to this motorcycle. The off-road riding is really good fun. We'll start with the ergonomics. One of the reasons that they have given it shorter travel suspension obviously is a lower seat height. It's 860 mm, whereas the international bike is 890 mm. There are riders out here of various sizes. People 5'7" onwards found themselves comfortable with the bike, but another reason that they found themselves comfortable is that the bike really feels light and manageable. I know the difference is only 5 kilos, but believe me, this feels much lighter, much easier than the 390 Adventure. I think some of that is psychological because you're not seeing all this big bodywork in front of you, but it's also down to the riding position. This has a different handlebar, and you've got 3 holes in the top clamp where you can mount the handlebar in 3 positions. It comes in the middle position, but the handlebar itself is a little different. It's wider, and I really like the seating ergonomics out here. Seat is flat like it should be on a dirt bike, so you can move around, move all the way forward if you want. The only ergonomic thing that I did not like was that these guards tended to foul with my knees when I moved all the way forward. When you're riding off-road, you generally have knee armor on, so it's not a problem, but I worry that maybe this could damage my knee brace. So it's something I would remove, but for road use, if you're someone who just wants basic protection for the bike, these guards are quite solid. Speaking of basic protection for the plastics, this is like the 390 Adventure, using plastics that are inspired by international dirt bikes from KTM's lineup. They do stain quite easily, but they're tough and they're designed to take a beating. Another thing I liked is that because there's less plastic around for you to see, the actual perceived quality of this motorcycle is better than the 390 Adventure, because the 390's black plastics have quite rough cutouts on them. This doesn't really have that issue. Switchgear is also nice and simple. You've got a 4-way toggle switch. Very easy to use this display. It's a tiny little display, but it is a TFT. And it's easy to control via this toggle switch. The things that you would want to do with this button are to switch between the riding modes, turn the bike into off-road mode, maybe turn off the traction control. There's also a dedicated ABS button here. So you long press this button and it turns off the front ABS as well, which is quite a unique thing, and it's a nice thing to have off-road. There are also digital luxuries in this motorcycle, things that you really will not find in many enduro bikes. However, there is one important feature that's missing, and that is a fuel gauge, which means you'll have to rely on a low fuel warning light. Bluetooth connectivity, navigation assists, call assists, it's all in there. Small screen, but it has all the functionality. Now, electronics. Something I found really impressive was the off-road traction control on this motorcycle. I effectively kept it on for the whole ride. It allows a lot of spin. It allows you to slide the bike out, but it doesn't allow the bike to go completely away from you. I did turn it off for a while, and you have to be more careful with your throttle on this loose, stony surface out here, because a bike can really snap sideways too much, which puts you offline. The off-road traction control on this bike works well. Keep it on, it just helps you with your riding, and I found that quite impressive. Okay, let's talk about actual off-road riding. We were split into 3 different courses. The first course of the day was a nice trail ride, and for me, that is what this motorcycle is about. We went through some steep uphill, downhill sections, there were some rocky sections, there was a river crossing, and man, I really enjoyed riding this bike in that setting. First of all, like I said, the suspension works much better. I really didn't make much adjustability to it. In the end, there was a high-speed section, 3rd gear, 4th gear, approaching 100 kilometers an hour, and when you hit rocks, that's when you could feel the front end coming close to bottom out, so just add a few clicks of compression, and that did make an improvement. But for me, what I really enjoyed about this bike is just how friendly it feels. This is what the standing up ergonomics look like. As usual, I do have a bit of a lean forward. Really tall riders will want to add a riser, but the interface of the bike out here is very good. The grip for the motorcycle along the sides, and you've got the same big toothy foot pegs that you get on the 390 Adventure. So riding the bike in terms of interacting with it off-road is very good, and the difference is that it just feels so small and light. While the seat height has gone up compared to the Adventure because of the shape of the seat and that larger tire, a positive offset of this is that you now get even more ground clearance in the 390 Adventure, and it's now a little above 250 mm. Another really nice thing are these Mitas EO7 tires. When you're going down steep inclines, you can really feel the tire biting into the mud, giving you feedback. You're getting good feedback off the front brake, and that again gives you so much confidence with what the chassis is already doing. So this bike comes together much more nicely for me off-road compared to the 390 Adventure, partly because of the tires, but mostly because of the suspension. After the lovely off-road trail, we had 2 courses designed for the bike. Both of them were sort of MX courses with jumps and banked corners. And that's where the 390 Enduro R reminds you that it's more of a casual riding motorcycle rather than a serious competition bike. It took some fairly big jumps, and it did bottom out on some of those jumps on the landing, but even when it bottoms out, the bike feels composed, controlled, and it doesn't make you worry about, am I going to get out of this situation quite well? Now, this kind of riding is something I really struggle with. My road riding instincts come into play. I keep having to remind myself, raise your elbows, move forward. And I don't enjoy that kind of riding so much, but I would love to spend more time with this bike in a place like this with proper trainers and learn how to ride. And I think that is what the 390 Enduro is all about. Take it to the trails when you want to, ride out with your friends, have fun, but also learn to be a better off-road rider. This bike could easily get you into entry-level rally championships in India, and from there you can progress onto something more serious. But as a capable, beginner-friendly, but also fast and exciting motorcycle, the 390 Enduro R sort of exists in the category of its own. The KLX 230 from Kawasaki is going to be at a similar price, and the KLX is a lot lighter, 30 to 40 kilos lighter, but the KLX doesn't have the power that this one does. So they're both doing things slightly differently, but this is definitely the more exciting bike, and it has a good level of capability as well. So the 390 Enduro is fun and capable off-road, and even very high-level riders like Johnny Aubert, who's a two-time world Enduro champion, who KTM brought down here to ride with us, have fun on this bike. Yes, they say that the suspension has limitations, and they will meet those limitations quite quickly, but that's a very high-level rider. Someone like me, there's a long way to go before I can meet the capabilities of this motorcycle, and I think that lies in its appeal. The other aspect of its appeal is that it's road legal. Now, that means that you should be able to use this bike on an everyday basis, commute on it to work, maybe take it out for a long ride if you're up to the challenge. And in that perspective, I don't have too much to share with you today because this was largely an off-road event. We did have a small stretch of road riding, but really not enough to tell you what it's like. So yes, I definitely want to get this bike back home, and I want to see if it's that motorcycle that can be practical enough for the daily grind, for your commutes to work, but also let you go out on the weekend and have lots of fun. And I mean, in terms of features, it's really not bad. You have the adjustable levers that you get on the 390 Adventure. You even have the up and down bi-directional quick shifter, which again makes this quite an appealing bike on the street. There's also a little USB charging port out here, so it's not like it's a completely skimped away off-road motorcycle. It has enough to have appeal as your daily rider. We just need to see if it's comfortable enough to do that. Before we move on to the conclusion, I should mention that a couple of riders had an issue where the bike threw up a high coolant temperature warning. It didn't happen to me. I was also riding aggressively, and with this sort of off-road riding, it's all first gear, second gear, throughout the day, especially in the tighter tracks. I didn't have that problem, but it is something that happened to a few people, and it's something I have noticed on the 390 Adventure as well, where it does throw up a high coolant temperature warning, which then goes away. So again, it's something we're going to have to see how the bike fares with, not only off-road, but also in dense moving traffic. There is also the inescapable fact that Bajaj has watered this bike down for India. And while I can see their reasoning for trying to make it more accessible to a wider audience, it is also definitely disappointing for a lot of enthusiasts. The way I see it, this bike should not have the R in the name, and Bajaj should also sell the proper international spec 390 Enduro R alongside it. At the very least, the long travel suspension should be offered as a reasonably priced accessory for those who want it. And with that addressed, I've got to say I really enjoyed riding this motorcycle, and I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would after I heard the presentation that they had dialed down the suspension for India. To their credit, yes, it's less travel suspension, but it works. This thing is genuinely fun, it's easy, it's encouraging. I mean, to give you an example of how encouraging this is, I am now flying to Bangkok tomorrow night to go and ride a Panigale V4 at the racetrack. I'm very excited about it, and my whole objective today was don't hurt yourself. But we came to a point on the trail where the instructor asked us, there's a tough section out there, would you like to try it, or would you like to turn around and take the safe way back? And the unanimous answer for me was, yeah, why not? Yeah. And that's just because of how encouraging and confidence inspiring this bike is. And I think that's exactly what a fun trail riding enduro bike should be. So if you're looking for something that is capable for off-road riding on the weekend, hopefully should be comfortable enough to be used in the city, the 390 Enduro, at least from what I've experienced today, seems to be really, really quite appealing.